Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the 2v2 arena video guide that I wanted to kind of go over. Wanted to talk about playstyle, comps, go over some gameplay footage of, what I did well, what I did, you know, wrong. And just instead of necessarily talking about talents every game or, um, I guess like gear and all this kind of stuff. It's a similar format to the first video. It's a lot more about decision making, thought processes, the general play style. I think is the best way to look at this video in 2v2. Regarding my experience, I've played a whole bunch of twos in a lot of different seasons, mainly in Warrior. This season, I played a whole bunch at the start in the first couple of days, and then I kind of moved into threes, and I've used my twos more for boosts more recently. But I do feel like Warrior is in an extremely good spot in twos. It's probably not the strongest melee, but I would say it's second for sure, right under Windwalker. Um, it does feel really weak into some comps, especially really good Windwalker H powers. But we'll kind of go over that in more of the gameplay footage. So a couple of things I really want to note about twos in particular. It does feel like gear and racials have a way bigger impact in twos than in threes. And how I mean by that is a lot of the games, you can probably get away with running the human trinket, so that means you can run double DPS trinkets, which do boost your DPS considerably. And a lot of games do end up just going straight to dampening. If both players, like on both sides, are playing pretty well and nobody's making massive mistakes, and at the same time, no one's making huge plays, uh, it can end up seeming like every single game just goes to who has the better healer in regards to like mana efficiency, um, and who's like the best at trading cooldowns. And that's how I would kind of think about twos a lot of the times. You have your essentially you have this constant trade of cooldowns which is happening throughout the game. And if both players or both teams, assuming that there's no huge comp disadvantage, are trading cooldowns correctly, you're going to end up feeling like every single game is just ending on mana or just raw damage. Um, but at lower ratings, what I find is that it's sort of the inverse. A lot of the games you can close up really quickly if you use your cooldowns efficiently, and respond properly when the enemy team uses their cooldowns. And I guess in that sense, like gear's not going to make a huge difference if both players are making misplays and not responding properly because you can take advantage of their mistakes. However, as you go higher and higher in CR, you'll notice that it can feel very, very difficult to beat a 215 eye level warrior or a 220 eye level warrior if you're a 184 in your fresh PvP gear. So if that feels like the case, it's not that you're playing badly. It's probably just you're playing someone equally matched, or maybe even if they're a little worse, who has a considerable gear advantage. And there's not many things that can offset that except for you just consistently improving, but also looking at, is there a way that you can get more gear? If that's time walking for the Alduar raid, um, getting into some Mythic Plus, even like just, making sure you're capped out and you're getting your three choices each week for RBGs. RBGs seem to be way, 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 way easier to get rating on. The MMR, in my opinion, seems like bugged. Like you can get 2400 in RBGs in like 50 like 100 games, and it seems like the amount of people at 2400 in RBGs is really really high. So look at other avenues if twos doesn't feel good in your current gear set, right? Um, so let's talk about comps. So in twos, the comp actually ends up mattering a considerable amount, and you'll feel that when you play with different healers. So what I consider like the S plus tier, probably the best or up there with the best 2's comp right now is Warrior HPAL. I feel like the reason for that is Bops and Freedoms are strong against all meta 2's comps. Meta 2's comps being Windwalker Healer, Warrior Healer, Ret Disc, Feral Disc, uh, Rogue Mage to an extent. I guess Rogue Mage is popular. Um, and Paladins have that Bop ability, but they also have the ability of Divine Toll with a Kyrian, Bubble, and Divine Favor. So they can top you really, really quickly. They can let you stay aggressive. They can help you with uptime with the freedoms. And if they're Night Fae, they can help you even do more damage with the blessings. Also, Judgment ends up doing a considerable amount of damage. Um, their choice of CC for the talent screen, because they have access to, I think, Repentance, Blind, and Faster Hodge, means that you can be pretty versatile into a lot of comps. You can kind of play around with CC options, Blind into double DPS, like Mage Rogues, to quickly peel, Rep into something that's more set up, where you're just tunneling a single target, and Fast Hodge, where you're making quick swaps to the healer. So extremely strong in the current meta N2s and 3s, and that Warrior H-Power combination, I feel like you can bring that combo into literally any comp in 3s and it works, and it's the same thing in 2s, it's just better. It feels very similar to like Warlock H-Power last season, where you could just put Warlock H-Power X and that comp just works. What I would say is the S tier, which isn't that far underneath, and I don't want people to like. I know a lot of people actually think Arsham is better. In my opinion, my video, I actually don't think Arsham's better in the current meta. And this is of, I don't actually have a date there, but 2nd of January 2021. So it's like the 4th week. It's super early. So this could all change in the next couple weeks. Um, what I do think Arsham really does bring is they bring the Purges, they bring Grounding, Lava Burst does excellent DPS, they've got general survivability, and the ability to drag out a game and just win via mana. But H-Pass can kind of have that mana win condition too, so it's not that big a difference. What I would say Arsham's lack is the ability to just press a massive immunity or a huge cooldown after Ascendance and Wall, and even then, like a lot of things can just kill you for Ascendance and Wall now, like Rets. Um, and they just don't have the O ship button that a lot of other classes, like or mainly just HPAL and I feel like in a way Disc Priest as well, have. So that's what I think is kind of not there yet. But I do think Arsham HPAL very, very, very close. I don't know how each scales with gear, so maybe Arsham will end up pulling ahead. I do think it was ahead for a considerable amount of time in the earlier weeks of the season, but I'm not sure what's necessarily changed. But it feels like maybe people understand how to play HPAL a bit better. The fact that HPALs don't need to cast as well is for the majority of their heals is pretty insane too. And what I would consider in the same tier, but maybe a little bit under, would be the Warrior Disc Priest. I think it's really fun. It's probably the most fun comp you can play in 2's as a warrior. You can play really, really aggressive. You've got mind control, you've got power infusion, dark arc, and mind games on the target. I just think it's a really cool playstyle. The games are quick, so if you're looking to cap conquest, you're just looking to spam games and get better, I'd recommend Warrior Disc. And putting both of those in such a high tier, and it can seem like, well, where can I put the rest? I don't even want to give the rest a tier list because I don't think, you know, it really suits this. I just think these two are like S plus S tier comps generally in the whole game. I feel like Warrior Resto Druid is like still okay, just because warriors are insanely OP, but it doesn't feel as good as every other warrior healer comp, except I do think it feels better than Mistweaver. Um, I feel like the fact that druids can't go into cat form and play aggressive a lot of the times without just dying, it feels really awkward a lot of the times, and like they're really susceptible to getting swapped. But if you have a really really good resto druid, then ignore all this. I think you can bring this to an S tier comp. It's really good. And I remember I versed forgot who it was, like Magnus or something, playing with a Resto Druid, Dino, and they just completely outplayed us. We were playing the meta Warrior H-Power comp, and I didn't know what to do. They were just, if you're versing two good players, you can pretty much make any of these comps work, right? But for the majority of people who are like looking to push 18, 2K, 2.1, 2.4, I don't think it's the optimal solution or like outcome, um, choice rather to pick, right? Uh, it just feels a little weak, and I feel like Windwalkers do really well into it as well. When they get those fists onto a druid and the druid has no outs, and there's like a disc priest casting a mind games on him, it feels like the world's about to end. So so really really hard. I think druids could be really good soon though. Just give it a bit more gear, maybe give it one hotfix, something that increases their healing by 4 or 5%, similar to the Arsham nerf. It's almost there. Warrior Mistweaver just really boring, just very very boring. I wouldn't recommend playing it. It doesn't feel strong, and it's just the Mistweaver is just spamming heals on you. It's like cool. Um, all the other ones have some more like interactivity and cool things you can do, but Blizzard's really done a shit job with class design and Mistweavers. So it is what it is. I barely see Mistweavers in twos. So when we talk about playstyle, obviously this varies with each healer, and how each healer plays. But generally, you want to start to get a cleave going out in two targets, which usually means looking for opportunities to slow both with like piercing howl, looking for opportunities to spear both, playing pretty aggressive and on top of healers, and just kind of trying to force DPS to come and peel back. Because Sweeping Strikes gives you this 75% extra damage on another target, and you can get 50% uptime on it, right? Essentially, half the game you could be hitting a second target for 75% of your damage and all your abilities, which is absolutely nuts in twos, right? You're going to get huge amounts of pressure, and a lot of momentum by getting the DPS and the healer stuck together. A lot of the times with a warrior that's pumping damage, it feels awkward not to hit the warrior, because you need to be constantly near him to be able to peel his goes, right? So definitely you want to look for opportunities to cleave, and the easiest way I tend to find to do that is to go healers and put a lot of pressure out. So the DPS comes back to try and peel. Obviously, at higher ratings with really good healers, that's not necessarily going to work. So you're going to have to try and look at your single target and just put out a huge amount of pressure. Um, but you want to be looking at using your Stormbolt typically to stun the kill target and then fear the off target. Coordinate this with your healer, usually at the start of a queue session if you've never played with them, or during the queue session as you go. So you can get that consistent cross CC, because a Stormbolt on the DPS can allow your H-Power to get a rep, because the DPS can't kick it. A fear can also be followed up by a rep or a hex and all these other things. So you want to make sure you're communicating these before you go. And you're going to kind of see somewhat of that in the gameplay footage that I have later in the video. So in terms of win conditions, and I think this is the best way to look at twos, you need to look at what you're versing and consider how you're going to win. A lot of the times, like Warrior, H-Power, Arsham, even Druid can just win by pumping damage and waiting for dampening. It's a really boring playstyle, but if you're just looking to win the majority of games, playing defensive, pushing out huge amounts of damage on one target, or just cleaving, and just slowly waiting for dampening to kick in and for the healer to uh, is not a bad way to win, right? It does mean the games are pretty slow, and I tend to find that's like you're almost forced into playing like that against stuff like Feral and Rogue, which can just consistently reset and run, where you're just kind of swapping targets to make sure one target's ooming. A big part of your playstyle in twos, again, linked to that point, is uptime, right? You don't want to tunnel a single target and chase him around the map the whole time. If a Resto Druid is kiting you, you just instantly swap off and start hitting the DPS. It's all about uptime and damage over time, right? DPS, right? Um, if you're not getting that out, then you are going to slowly lose the game. And there's really nothing you can do about that. So consider if you're getting kited the whole time, you know, whether you can get your damage out in a big burst, wait for them to kite, and then as they're kiting you, quickly swap. What I like to do is, get a lot of the healer's cooldowns, force him to start, playing defensive, and when he might throw down like a cap totem and a root and try and start to kite me, just throwing a fear straight on him and swapping onto their DPS to maintain the pressure and force the healer to come out again. And then swapping back once the DPS responds. So looking at swaps and just looking at who you can hit the most is a really easy way to work out what the best target to hit is. Um, and this is something you should coordinate with your healer as well, right? Because a lot of the times your healer can help you, one, kill the target or CC the off target so that you can make swaps consistently. A really important thing I want to bring up as a key tip here is to make sure you're using intervene consistently and coordinating this with your healer. I have a really rudimentary weak aura I made that I send to healers I play 2's and 3's with a lot. And all it does, and my DPS as well, is just tells them when they have intervene on themselves, right? You can make this in 10 seconds. Just make a new aura and then import the icon, and it's a buff, intervene, because you get the buff on them. The reason for that is intervene can absorb a lot of the stuns, pretty much every single stun from all the meta DPS, which are like Windwalker, Ret, Warrior, Rogue, um, and it absorbs all their kicks apart from Feral. So you can intervene a H-Power who's getting trained, and they can immediately start casting a repentance on the healer, and you can just swap on to the other target, right? So this is a super powerful tool if you really want to push your synergy in 2's, and I feel like it's one of the most fun parts of playing Warrior Healer. So into the next part, what you'll feel strong against and what you'll feel weak against. And the idea of this is I feel like a lot of people don't know what warriors are good into. It feels like warriors are good into everything and then just randomly weak when you verse like a rat paladin. I feel like warriors have the ability to beat every single comp in the game. The toolkit is here: intervene, spear, stun, condemn's good too. So I'm just saying spear as a matter of fact. Condemn's also good. Ignore pain, distance. You can play for dampening, you can play like as a setup comp, you can really do anything, right? So um, I would say you're probably strongest against rogues, ferals, and mages because it feels like they're just completely countered if you just, use your buttons on their go and DPS them. There's nothing that can keep up with them. I feel like you're strong into unholy DKs. I think Frosty Ks are actually kind of interesting. Like they do seem kind of tough if they just train your healer, especially with a H-Pal, and if you're not playing with a H-Pal, right? Because they can just train your healer, get healed, and eventually kill him. And if you try and peel and DPS him, you're going to get kind of cleaved in their goes. You'll do really well into double DPS, especially once you get a good defensive synergy with your healer. So making sure you're rotating parry with their buttons, rotating trinkets, etc., etc. Into Windwalkers, I feel like it's 40-60. I feel like I lose about 60% of games against good Windwalkers, but you always have the potential to do insane amounts of burst onto them. So there is a way to outplay them consistently, and we'll go over that when we look through the gameplay footage. Reds seem to be about like 50-50. I feel like some warriors can stomp them, others can't. This really depends on how well you rotate your cooldowns and how much pressure you can do in these off windows. The hardest thing I think about versing red is that they can just suddenly turn around and in a hodge just blow insane amounts of damage when you're in deep damp or when you're out of cooldowns, and just finish your healer off. 100 to 0 in a stun when he doesn't have trinket. So this depends a lot on your healer, and I would say 2's depends a huge amount on your healer. Um, I think if you had a rank 1 healer and a 2400 warrior, or sorry, better example would be like a rank 1 healer this last season and a 1800 warrior, you could get to 23 2400 just by virtue of the fact that the warrior can just do damage and probably win with a dampening win condition. If you're playing with an 1800 healer and you're like a rank 1 DPS, I think it'd be a much harder effort to get to 2400. I think healers are really important. And in 2's, and there's sort of the make or break, because at the end of the day, um, 2's is heavily dominated by meta. I feel like 2's is the it just reflects what is strong at the moment. And you're not really going to verse too much else. Whereas in 3's, you might verse weird comps. You've got another DPS to help you peel, etc. You can see how that's different. So one final point, I wouldn't necessarily rely completely on 2's to help you um, learn arena. I think 3's is much better, but what 2's is really good at, right, is giving you mechanical skill, helping you understand cooldowns by the targets, um, like just giving you pretty much the groundwork so you can build on top of that. I think 3's does make you a little bit tunnel visiony. Sorry, 2's, sorry, makes you a bit tunnel visiony, and a lot of the plays you might do in 2's that might be good might not necessarily be optimal in 3's. So keeping that in mind, we're going to flick onto some 2's footage with some commentary, uh, and if there's anything I missed in this guide, I'm happy to cover on a second video. This is sort of trying to be general. I didn't want this to be like, I think it's already pretty long. It's already 20 minutes, right? But I didn't want to go over every single comp and what they do. I'd rather just get straight into the footage. So if you watch the playlist, I've linked this all into a playlist because I don't know how to merge all the videos. I'm just really bad at this stuff. You can have a look and just see what comps you might struggle against, or just watch all of them to see, what my decision making and thought process is. All right, guys. Thanks for watching.